shocking details continue to emerge about what allegedly went on at Sean Diddy Combs' freak-off parties, and we're learning what it took to get on the list of the alleged drug and alcohol-fueled party. According to a report by the New York Post, one party planner said the women invited were subjected to a weight requirement, and Diddy was seemingly picky about the women who attended the notorious freak-offs. One anonymous party planner who claimed she worked with the embattled music mogul told the New York Post she kept a scale in her car to make sure no female guests weighed more than 140 pounds. She told the Post, "We would do a weigh-in if necessary. The girls had to be young and hot, so I always had a scale nearby in case I needed to make sure. The number was 140 pounds, but if a girl was really tall, there was a little bit of discretion involved." The anonymous party planner told the outlet there were other requirements too, like no flab, no cellulite, the women couldn't be overly pierced or tattooed, they couldn't have short hair, and the girls had to be young and hot. And the women had to dress to impress the mogul. The planner said no pants, no jeans, no flat shoes. Everyone had to be in stilettos. Every girl had to wear a party dress that was preferably short, but long enough to cover their butt. However, it couldn't be longer than mid-thigh, and the cleavage has to show. As Combs has been locked up since his arrest and more lawsuits have been filed against the mogul, some Jane and John Does allege they were minors at the time of the alleged assault. The party planner admitted to the Post they never asked how old the girls were. The anonymous party planner said it was a don't ask, don't tell situation. She said she was young herself during that time and thought they weren't asking their ages because of drinking laws. Another source told the Post she was a dancer who performed at the Bad Boy Records founder's 2005 VMA after party. She also remained anonymous, but told the outlet she was paid $250 to dance at the after party, but was told there was an extra $1,000 for her if she went to the mogul's house later for more dancing. She said she was just 20 years old at the time and said ultimately she didn't go to his home, but said she knew other girls who did, but they wouldn't really talk about what happened there. I want to thank Upside for sponsoring today's Law&Crime YouTube takeover. Upside is a free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas and groceries. And it's actual real cash back too. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you can transfer straight into your bank account. Plus, it's truly so simple and easy to use. So once you have the Upside app, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. You pay as usual using a debit or a credit card and follow the steps on the app and get paid. To find out how much you could earn and to see if you can get cash back at your favorite spot, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on your screen and use our promo code LCTakeover and get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Again, that's promo code LCTakeover for an extra 25 cents back on your first gallon of gas. Combs' notorious freak-offs have been at the center of the government's case against the mogul. After his arrest on charges of sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, and transportation to engage in prostitution, the now disgraced mogul pleaded not guilty to the charges and continues to deny all wrongdoing. And following his arrest in mid-September, the mogul faces several civil lawsuits from women and men across the country who allege he sexually assaulted them during his exclusive parties. In one of the most recent batch of lawsuits he faces, the backdrop of his accuser's rape was an after-party at the 2000 VMAs. One lawsuit filed by a woman under the moniker Jane Doe alleged she was just 13 years old when the hip-hop producer drugged and raped her with another unnamed male celebrity, and they took turns watching with an unnamed female celebrity. And some of the plaintiffs, who include men who have filed lawsuits against the mogul, allege his infamous white parties weren't just a place for celebrities to mix and mingle. Another suit filed by a John Doe who lives in North Carolina alleged he was just 16 years old when he was recruited to attend the mogul's infamous white party in the Hamptons. He claims while at the party he spoke with Combs about his Hollywood dreams. However, Diddy allegedly told him he needed to inspect his penis because it was a rite of passage for anyone trying to break into the industry. Doe alleged Combs cupped his genitals for an extended period of time and told him people would be in touch with him. Another John Doe, who said he was a security guard at the infamous party, alleged Combs sexually assaulted him. Combs has denied all the allegations against him. In a statement, his attorneys wrote, "In court, the truth will prevail, that Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted anyone, adult or minor, man or woman." According to Combs' federal indictment, the freak-offs were elaborate and produced sex performances and were highly organized parties. According to federal prosecutors, Combs used his associates to book hotel suites, recruit sex workers, and distributed various drugs to coerce partygoers into sex and keep them obedient. The government alleges Combs recorded the drug-fueled orgies and watched them for his own pleasure. But the indictment wasn't the first time we've heard of the freak-offs. They were first mentioned in Cassie's jaw-dropping lawsuit that was filed in federal court last November and settled within a day. However, according to Combs's attorneys, the so-called freak-offs were consensual and said the individuals who participated wanted to be there. But eventually, it'll be up to a jury to decide the mogul's fate, as Diddy will ultimately have to answer to his alleged crimes in trial, which is slated for next year. Let's bring on criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson Ferrer to get her take on these claims. Now, Safa, it's always great to see you. What's your reaction to this anonymous party planner for Diddy who says she kept a scale in her car to weigh women who were entering Diddy's parties and freak off parties?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by this. And the only reason I say that is because whoever this person is, although they're having this conversation and remaining anonymous, she's essentially admitting to having participation in these alleged freak offs. So she's kind of putting herself on the hook to come under this RICO umbrella or a conspiracy umbrella as being a participant of that alleged activity that Mr. Combs is charged with. There's information that leads me to believe that she's had a conversation where she's admitted to keeping a scale in her car, making sure that these women who attended these parties were no more than 140 pounds, and that she was there to ensure that they met that weight requirement. She had a lot of information about, what these women were allowed to wear and not to wear, the descriptions that these women should look like, in terms of physical appearance. And so it's very interesting to me that she's had this conversation, whoever this woman is, although she's asked to remain anonymous, she's certainly putting herself on the hook to be a part of this RICO charge and conspiracy, in having these conversations and admitting to her own participation.
And the requirements that she alleged were made kind of sound like a magazine cover from 2005. Be young and hot, wear high heels, no cellulite, no flab, can't be overly pierced or tattooed, can't have short hair. What do you make of that? And also, with that being said, if this anonymous party planner was somebody who helped organize these freak off parties, even though she says she never, or excuse me, even though she said she left before the freak offs actually happened, does that still apply that she could be charged potentially under this RICO indictment?
Absolutely. She's made herself a party to this action, for lack of a better way to put it. And although she's not a party to the United States of America versus Sean Diddy Combs, she certainly has made herself a witness by making these sorts of statements and admitting to this sort of participation in these freak offs. And so that's a part of the conspiracy, is that there is a group of people who do certain things in order to bring about a certain result. So these freak off parties where there's alleged to have been women or people who've been intoxicated, who have been forced into sex with sex workers and things of that nature. If this particular person was at the outset or at the beginning of this experience of checking people in, making sure that they're appropriate weight requirements and things of that nature. And yes, she may have left, but she also aided in facilitating those things that ultimately went on, if what she is saying is true. So she definitely is putting herself out there, and she could certainly be held responsible. At minimum, the federal government is going to want to speak to whoever this witness is, if they haven't already, to gain additional information. And like I said, she's a witness at this point based on what she said.
According to this report, the guests were asked about their weight, but they weren't asked about their age. And this source claims it was because of drinking laws. And some of the lawsuits that we're seeing that involve minors, it just seems like when we're kind of comparing them, it just seems like overall there wasn't a care to ask these young women and even these young men their age when they're surrounded by Diddy and other adults who are using alcohol, who are using drugs at these types of parties. But why do you think that they didn't ask the simple question, "Hey, how old are you?"
Two words: plausible deniability. I think that what a lot of people do is that they think that if they don't know, or if they don't ask the question, like, how old are you, that removes them from any liability because they don't know. So, I that would be my opinion as to why they maybe didn't ask, to keep themselves out of the loop. Well, I didn't know how old she was, so, I can't be charged or I can't be liable, which is actually untrue. Not only that, if these individuals were underage and there's drinking and they're drinking as a part of the party with, Mr. Combs and whoever else, there's certainly a question, at least in the state of New York, as to whether they could have been charged at that point in time with endangering the welfare of a child, and a list of other charges with respect to that alleged activity. But I think that oftentimes people don't want to ask the question because they want to be able to deny it later or act as they are oblivious, like ignorance is bliss. But they can still be held responsible, certainly. So I think that would be why those questions weren't asked, if that's the case, to avoid that.
Yeah, and it was interesting that this source says that there was kind of a don't ask, don't tell policy when it came to that. And we've done so many reports on Diddy, and kind of at the center of the government's case has always been these freak offs in the indictment that we have right now. There are only three charges, but how important are the freak offs in the overall nature of the government's case?
They're really important. And one thing I actually want to know, kind of to your question before, was it's alleged that the government executed these search warrants and that they're in possession of videos of these freak offs. I would note that Mr. Combs has not been charged with anything related to anybody that's been underage. So that's one thing to think about here. So whether or not that's in fact true will remain a question until we get more information or as we start to head towards trial. But these freak offs are going to be important because what we seem to know at this point is that these alleged freak offs took place with, men and women. They took place with sex workers who may have been transported across interstate lines, which that is one of the requirements for a specific statute with regard to trafficking. And not only that, but that these individuals, some of them who were held against their will or were drugged or were forced to engage into the sexual activity and things of that nature. So those freak offs are going to be very key here with respect to, the trafficking charge at least. We still have the additional charge where we have victim one, and that is separate and apart, but it's also taken in conjunction with those freak offs to paint a bigger picture. And it sort of create the narrative or weave in the facts to show that, Mr. Combs allegedly this was the type of person he was. These were the types of things that his enterprise engaged in. They had done it with, one female victim or victim one, if it is a female victim. And not only did he do it with this specific victim, but he's also done it with other individuals. And that victim one may have also been a party to these freak offs, which there appears to be evidence that he's transported sex workers across interstate lines and engaged with a number of individuals in those freak offs.
And, a Diddy party before was such a lucrative event, and it seemed like the go to place to be if you're a celebrity. But if you're looking at all of these lawsuits, it appears that, it was a breeding ground for rampant sexual violence. And I'm talking about the lawsuits here and not the federal indictment. Given all these suits, and with this latest batch involving minors, can Diddy's defense team, and again, I'm talking about the lawsuits here, can they really claim that this was consensual? Like, what are really the defenses here to the staggering amount of lawsuits on top of the federal indictment?
Yeah, I think that Mr. Combs' attorneys are essentially going to have to say that, if any activity did in fact occur. And so I guess we'll step back for a second. They're going to either deny that those things happened and do away with some of the lawsuits if they are frivolous, and there will be facts and circumstances that are determined, according to law on those. If they did in fact occur, their argument is more than likely going to be that this activity was consensual, that this person was a willing participant, and not only that, but that these individuals assumed the risk of being present at those parties, of engaging and voluntarily engaging in the sexual conduct and being in those spaces, consuming drugs, consuming alcohol, and things of that nature. So certainly either going to deny outright, and if there has been confirmed activity, then that the activity was consensual.
And at the center of these freak offs, a lot of people, and it's been kind of earing in the background a little bit when it comes to this case of other celebrities being involved. At this point in time, given that we're past a month of Diddy being behind bars, and there's always been this alluding to other celebrities being involved, that their names are going to be dropped. Why do you think at this stage in the investigation, in the case, that we haven't heard any other names beyond Sean Combs?
It's still pretty early in the proceedings. I think it's only been about a month or a month and a half since he's been arraigned and held in detention. And so The investigations are always going to be a continuous and ongoing process. I'm sure at this point there's been an exchange of discovery. And not only that, but I think there's been a gag order placed on the attorneys with information that they can and cannot share. But more importantly, it's still very early on. So my guess would be that the attorneys on both sides are trying to keep information as close to their chest as possible because they don't want to scare off any witnesses. They don't want to hopefully taint the jury, and they want to keep the integrity of their investigation. As things continue on forward and discovery is explored, and we start to get to the hearing stage, motions and hearing stage, where they're moved to dismiss the charges and things like that, or request relief for hearings, then we may start to get a little bit more information on what other individuals may have been involved. And certainly, if this case makes it to trial, we will absolutely more than likely know what other celebrities may have been involved or what other individuals have been involved.
And how crucial will Sean Combs's associates be, those who had worked for Bad Boy Records or Bad Boy Enterprise or any of his conglomerate of enterprises that he had had? How important will their testimony be if they are called as witnesses for the government in their case? How important could they be in kind of piecing together, hey, this is what happened at this time, this is how we did this, and what could that look like, even though we're still months away from the trial?
Those witnesses are going to be crucial. Now, the interesting part here is that the government is going to try to leverage these individuals against Mr. Combs. What they're going to do is say, hey, John Smith, for a hypothetical name, we know that you did X, Y, and Z, that you participated and that you committed these acts which furthered the enterprise and furthered this activity. We will charge you unless you want to get ahead of this and cooperate with us as a witness, for our investigation and for our prosecution. And so those individuals are going to be very crucial. There's going to be other questions, legal questions that those individuals will have to figure out and dig through, if they're going to waive specific rights, if they're going to have any immunity. All of those things are legal things that we're going to have to get around before we get to the point of them testifying, before they decide what position they're going to take on this case, because they can be equally liable as Mr. Combs if they are found or viewed in the eyes of the government as a part of that enterprise.
Now, say you're on the Diddy defense team, what kind of angles and pulls are you gonna be doing to defend your client if you were on his defense team?
You know, as a part of Mr. Combs' team, I think that we would first have to figure out what was the catalyst for all of these allegations, number one, which I think Miss Ventura's, allegations certainly were that. But taking things step by step, we need to explore each and every witness. We need to launch our own investigation and have our investigators and things of that nature go out and speak to these individuals. We need to be able to be realistic with what our expectations are and really get to the evidence. Sometimes what happens is the government can make an allegation against somebody and it looks bad when you hear it. But when you actually dive into the evidence, when you see these videos and you see this footage or you speak to these witnesses, it oftentimes creates a narrative that completes the picture that may not be as bad as what it could be or what you would think it was on paper. And I know that's bad and people may not want to hear that. And I'm not saying that would absolve him from all liability. But at the end of the day, we have to take things step by step, one piece at a time, and get through each witness, get through every allegation. And sometimes there are ways that we can explain away normal conduct. Like, we're not going to criminalize sex in this country. We're not going to criminalize buying baby oil and other things of that nature. Now, certainly if it's with a minor or if someone had done these things not at their own will, then we have a different conversation. But we've got to be very careful, explore the facts, exploit those facts in terms of crafting and creating our defense.
Right, I guess we'll have to wait and see how this all continues to play out, and I'm sure you and I will continue to have more conversations along the way. Safa, thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate it. Before we sign you off, anything else you'd like to add?
Thanks for having me. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Safa. Appreciate your time as always. Sean Combs pleaded not guilty to charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, and transportation to engage in prostitution. His next court date is slated for next month, and his trial is slated for May of next year. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.